My name is Patricia Bennett. I'm 61 years old. At 10:42 on the morning of March 14th, I sat in courtroom 3 of the Willow County Family Court while my daughter-in-law told a judge I was emotionally unsafe for my grandson. Her name was Ashley Bennett. She was 34 years old, wearing a cream blazer, soft curls, and the same delicate gold cross necklace I had given her on the day she married my son. She sat at the petitioner's table beside her attorney, one hand resting on a folder, the other hand pressed to her chest in a way that made distress look rehearsed. My son, Evan, sat next to her with his eyes on the floor. That hurt more than I expected. Not because Evan had surprised me, because by then, he hadn't. Ashley looked toward the judge and said, "Your Honor, Patricia has always used money as control. When we set boundaries, she became vindictive. We just want to protect Mason from manipulation." Mason, my grandson, 8 years old, missing 2 front teeth, freckle under his left eye, loved dinosaurs, scrambled eggs with too much cheese, and sitting on my back porch counting cardinals. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just folded my hands over the navy folder in my lap and waited. Then Judge Marianne Kessler adjusted her glasses, looked at Ashley, and said, "Mrs. Bennett, before we discuss visitation, I need you to explain why the child's education savings account was emptied in December." The room went completely still. Ashley's face changed first, not dramatically, just enough. Her mouth parted, her eyes moved to Evan. Evan closed his. What they didn't know was that I had not come to court with feelings. I had come with statements. What they didn't know was that the college fund my late husband and I had opened for Mason when he was born had not simply disappeared. What they didn't know was that every withdrawal, every transfer, every purchase, and every lie had been documented. And what Ashley definitely didn't know was that refusing to fund her lifestyle had not made me powerless. It had made me precise. Before I tell you how we reached that courtroom, tell me where in the world you're watching or listening from, and what time it is there. I always wonder where stories like this find people, especially women who were pushed out of their own families for saying no, then blamed for the consequences of other people's choices. If stories about women who were betrayed, underestimated, and quietly took their power back speak to you, like this video and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Because this is not a story about a grandmother fighting for control. This is that story. I became a grandmother on August 6th, in the middle of a thunderstorm. Mason Bennett was born at 2:23 in the morning at St. Luke's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. The rain beat so hard against the windows that the nurse joked he had arrived with his own applause. My son Evan called me at 2:48, voice shaking. "Mom," he said, "he's here." I sat up in bed so quickly my late husband David reached for his glasses and knocked them onto the floor. "Is he all right?" I asked. "He's perfect," Evan said. One word. Perfect. David and I drove to the hospital before sunrise. The streets shone black under the traffic lights. I remember carrying a paper bag with blueberry muffins because I did not know what else to do with my hands. When we entered the room, Ashley was in bed, pale and exhausted, holding a tiny bundle against her chest. Evan stood beside her like he had been rearranged by awe. Ashley looked up and said, "Do you want to meet your grandson?" I did, more than I could say. Mason's face was wrinkled and red, his fists were tucked under his chin. He made a soft sound, not quite a cry, and opened one eye as if he were suspicious of the lighting. David touched my elbow. "Patty," he whispered, "look at him." I looked. Something inside me opened so gently it almost hurt. I had loved my son. I had loved my husband. I had loved friends, students, neighbors, and the stray gray cat that slept in our garage every winter. But loving a grandchild was different. It was love with memory behind it. Love with fewer demands. Love that arrived already knowing time was not endless. David and I opened Mason's college fund when he was 6 days old. Not because anyone asked, because David believed in preparing quietly. He had been an accountant for 39 years, the kind of man who labeled file folders with a ruler and still balanced our checkbook by hand every Sunday night. He wore the same brown leather belt for 20 years and could remember the exact interest rate on our first mortgage, but forgot where he put his coffee at least twice a day. He loved Mason immediately and practically. At the kitchen table on August 12th, with a yellow legal pad in front of him, he said, "We'll start with 10,000. Then monthly contributions, birthdays too. If the market behaves, he'll have a strong start by 18. I poured coffee into his mug. College may cost a fortune by then. That's why we start now. He looked up at me and smiled. Nobody builds a future all at once, Patty. You lay bricks. So we laid bricks. A custodial education account in Mason's name. David and I as contributors. Evan and Ashley listed as parents, but not primary custodians. David insisted on that. Not because he distrusted them then. Because he had spent his life watching good intentions become poor paperwork. Access later, with structure, he said. Parents are tired. Tired people make emotional decisions. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. I have apologized to him in my head many times for that. Evan was 30 when Mason was born. He worked in sales for a building supply company. Charming enough to get meetings and disorganized enough to miss follow-up emails, unless someone reminded him. He had always been easy to love and difficult to rely on. As a boy, he could talk his way out of almost anything. A late assignment, a dented fender, a forgotten bill. He had David's smile without David's discipline, my tenderness without my patience. I knew his weaknesses. Mothers always do, even when we pretend surprise to spare ourselves. Ashley was 26 when she married him. She had grown up in Dayton, worked as a salon manager, and had a talent for appearing fragile exactly when accountability approached. She was pretty lively and affectionate when things went her way. She called me Mom Bennett during the engagement and said she had always wanted a close mother-in-law. I wanted to believe her. The wedding was held in May, at a country barn venue with string lights, eucalyptus runners, and mason jars nobody drank from. David and I paid for the rehearsal dinner. Ashley's parents paid for the flowers. Evan paid for nothing because he was, quote, between commission cycles. A phrase I later learned meant he had spent the money on a fishing boat he promised to sell. At the rehearsal dinner, Ashley stood to thank everyone. Patricia and David, she said, raising her glass. You have made me feel like part of the family from day one. Everyone clapped. I smiled. I did not know yet that in Ashley's world, being family meant being available. For the first few years, we were close enough to look close from the outside. I babysat when Ashley returned to work part-time. I brought casseroles. I paid for Mason's first winter coat when Evan said the utility bill had been higher than expected. David repaired their garbage disposal, installed shelves in the nursery, and showed Evan how to manage insurance paperwork, while Evan nodded and forgot half of it. Ashley thanked us often then. Patricia, you're a lifesaver. Patricia, I don't know what we'd do without you. Patricia, Mason is so lucky. I heard the gratitude. I also heard the expectation growing underneath it. The first time I noticed the pattern was Mason's second birthday. Ashley planned a dinosaur party in their backyard. She ordered custom cookies, balloon arches, a rented bounce house, and a cake shaped like a volcano. On the Tuesday before the party, she called me at 4:12 in the afternoon. Patricia, she said, voice light and rushed. Small emergency. What happened? The bounce house company needs final payment today, and Evan's commission check is delayed. How much? $680. For a bounce house? It includes delivery. I looked across my kitchen at David, who was reading the newspaper. He lowered it slightly, because he knew that tone in my voice. Ashley, that's a lot for a 2-year-old's birthday. There was a pause. Then she laughed softly. I know, but it's for memories. Memories. A word people use when they want spending to sound sacred. I paid it. Not because I agreed. Because Mason loved dinosaurs and because saying no still felt meaner than being used. At the party, Ashley posted photos online with the caption, "We go all out for our boy, we." David looked at the post that night and said, "That was our bounce house." I said, "Let it go." He did not answer. The second time came when Mason was 4. Evan lost his job after missing sales targets for 3 quarters. He told us the company was restructuring. David called a friend in the industry and learned that was only partly true. Ashley called the next week. "We need help with the mortgage," she said. David and I were sitting on the porch after dinner. I put the phone on speaker. How much? David asked. 2 months. 3 would be better. David closed his eyes. That's nearly $5,000. Ashley's voice trembled. We have a child. The sentence landed like a door closing. We have a child. As if David and I did not know. As if Mason's existence made every request righteous. David said, we can help with 1 month directly to the lender. Evan needs to sit down with me and make a budget. Ashley sniffed. He already feels awful. Feeling awful doesn't pay bills. I touched David's arm, but he did not soften. We paid 1 month. Evan never came for the budget meeting. 2 weeks later, Ashley posted a photo from a weekend hotel stay in Cincinnati. Caption, sometimes parents need to reconnect. David stared at the photo for a long time. Then he said, Patty, we are not helping them, we are cushioning impact. That sentence stayed with me. The third time came after David died. He passed away on January 27th, 2 winters before the courtroom. A heart attack in our driveway, while carrying salt for the porch steps. He was 64. One moment he was there in his blue coat, complaining that the snow shovel handle was loose. 10 minutes later, the ambulance lights were red against the garage door and I was standing in the cold holding his left glove. Grief made the house enormous. For weeks, I moved through rooms David had organized and felt ambushed by evidence. His reading glasses beside the bed, his handwriting on freezer labels, his boots near the back door. The checkbook balanced through the previous Sunday. Mason was 6 then. He came over the Saturday after the funeral and climbed into my lap without asking. He smelled like peanut butter and little boy shampoo. Grandpa David is in heaven, he asked. That's what I believe. Does heaven have cardinals? I hope so. He leaned against me. Then he can count them first. That was the first time I cried where anyone could see. Only with Mason. Ashley was kind for about 3 weeks after David died. Then the requests resumed. At first, small things. Groceries. Gas cards. A new tablet for Mason's schoolwork. Soccer fees. I paid for the school things directly. I bought groceries myself. I avoided handing over cash. Ashley noticed. In March, she called and asked for $12,000. I was at the kitchen table sorting David's tax documents. His empty chair sat across from me. $12,000 for what? I asked. We're consolidating. Consolidating what? Credit cards, medical bills, some personal loans. How much is credit card debt? She sighed. Patricia, I'm not calling for an audit. No, you're calling for $12,000. Her voice sharpened. Evan is your son, and Mason is my grandson. Exactly. Helping us helps him. I looked at David's framed photograph on the sideboard. No, I said. The word surprised us both. Ashley went quiet. What? No, I'm not giving you $12,000. We could lose the house. Then I will pay the utility company directly, buy groceries, and help with Mason's school expenses. I will not give you money without seeing the bills. Her voice became cold. That feels controlling. It is controlled. There's a difference. You know, grief has made you harder. That was the first cruel thing she said after David died. I wrote it down, not because I planned to use it. Because David had taught me that records keep people honest, even when honesty arrives late. After that call, everything changed. Ashley stopped asking me to babysit. She said they were, quote, building healthier family rhythms. She stopped sending pictures from Mason's school events. She changed the pickup list, so I could no longer surprise him with lunch. When I texted asking if he wanted to come over on Saturday, she replied 4 hours later. We're taking space. Taking space. Another phrase that sounds therapeutic until you look at who is using it and why. I called Evan. He answered on the 5th ring. Mom, Ash is upset. I understand that. She feels judged. I asked to see bills before giving $12,000. Yeah, but it's the way you said it. I closed my eyes. There it was. The way. When people cannot defend what they did, they prosecute your tone. Evan, I will always help with Mason. I will not fund chaos. He sighed. That sounds judgmental. It is judgment. Mom, your father and I built that college fund so Mason would have choices. I will not drain my savings so you and Ashley can avoid looking at yours." The line went quiet. Then he said, "The college fund is fine, right?" My eyes opened. "What does that mean?" "Nothing. I just mean, you always talk about it like it's separate." "It is separate, right?" I sat very still. "Evan, have you touched Mason's education account?" "No." "Too fast. Evan." I said no. He hung up 2 minutes later. That was the moment I stopped being the grandmother waiting politely at the edge of their life and started becoming the woman David had trusted to read the statements. I built it in silence. The next morning, March 21st, at 9:15, I called Whitaker Trust, the firm managing Mason's education account. The representative, a woman named Carla, verified my identity and pulled up the account. "How can I help, Mrs. Bennett?" "I need a full transaction history for the last 24 months. "Of course. Would you like it mailed or uploaded to your secure portal?" "Both." There was a pause. "Mrs. Bennett, I should let you know there have been substantial transactions." My hand tightened around the phone. "How substantial?" "I'm not permitted to characterize beyond the statement without review, but yes, substantial." "Who authorized them?" "Your son, Evan Bennett, was added as authorized parent representative last year after documentation was submitted." I stood up so quickly the chair scraped the floor. "By whom?" "I'll include the authorization paperwork in the packet." "When was he added?" December 12th. December 12th. 6 weeks before David died. I remembered that date. David had been in the hospital for an overnight cardiac observation after chest pains. Ashley had come to visit, carrying a get-well balloon and a folder she said contained school forms for Mason. She asked David to sign a permission slip for a field trip because Evan was at work. David was groggy from medication. I was downstairs getting coffee. My mouth went dry. "Send everything," I said. The packet arrived the next day. I opened it at the kitchen table where David had once laid out Mason's future on a yellow legal pad. The account had contained $118,400 in November. Years of contributions. Birthday gifts. Investment growth. David's last annual deposit, made December 1st. By February, the balance was $6,920. I read the number 3 times. Withdrawals began December 14th. $9,000, $15,000, $22,000, $8,500. Transfers to a checking account in Evan and Ashley's names. Debit card payment to a luxury furniture store. Payment to a travel company. Payment to a boutique clothing retailer. Payment to a car dealership. 2 transfers marked household emergency. 1 cashier's check for $31,000. I could hear David's voice in my head. "Nobody builds a future all at once, Patty. You lay bricks." They had pulled the bricks out from under their own child. The authorization paperwork was worse. David's signature appeared on a form granting Evan limited withdrawal authority for educational and emergency needs. But the signature was wrong. Not obviously wrong to a stranger. But I had lived with that handwriting for 40 years. David made his capital D with a loop. The signature on the form made it sharp. David never wrote his middle initial unless required. The form included it casually. And the date was December 12th, the day he was in the hospital. I called our attorney, Helen Ross, at 1:32 that afternoon. Helen was 67, direct, and had once told David during estate planning that sentimental people should never be allowed near blank forms. He adored her. She agreed to meet me the next morning. I brought the statements, the authorization form, David's medical records from December 12th, and 3 examples of his real signature. Helen read everything in silence. Then she removed her glasses and said, "Patricia, this is serious." "I know. This may involve fraud." "I know that too. Are you prepared for what that means?" I looked at David's signature on the page. "No," I said, "but Mason deserves someone who is." Helen advised immediate account freeze, fraud review, and documentation. We filed formal notice with Whitaker Trust. They froze remaining funds, pending investigation. Helen requested security logs, submission records, and copies of identification used to authorize the change. Then Ashley banned me completely. The text came on March 24th at 7:58 in the evening. Given your recent hostility and attempts to interfere in our parenting, Evan and I have decided it is best that Mason not have contact with you for the foreseeable future. Please respect this boundary. I read it twice. Then Evan sent one. Mom, don't make this worse. I sat in David's chair for the first time since he died. The cushion still remembered him better than people did. I typed one response. I will communicate through Helen. Then I did. The next 10 months were the hardest of my life after losing David. Not because Ashley shouted. She didn't. Not because Evan threatened. He mostly avoided. It was the quiet absence of Mason. No Saturday pancakes. No dinosaur documentaries. No school art taped to my refrigerator. No little voice calling from the porch. Grandma Patty, I saw 2 cardinals already. I sent birthday gifts through Helen's office. Ashley returned them. I mailed cards. They came back unopened. I attended his school's holiday concert but stood in the back because I was not on the approved family list. Mason saw me from the stage. His face lit up, then fell when Ashley turned and pulled her coat tighter around herself as if my presence were weather. I did not wave. I placed one hand over my heart. He saw. That was enough to keep me standing. If you have ever been punished with distance because you finally said no, write the word steady in the comments. Not because it does not hurt, it hurts terribly. But because steady is how you keep love from becoming obedience. And if stories about women protecting what matters without losing their dignity speak to you, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Some battles are not loud, some are filed correctly. In June, Helen filed a petition for grandparent visitation and protective review of Mason's educational account. Ohio law is not simple in these matters, and Helen warned me that grandparents do not automatically win rights simply because they love a child. Love matters, she said, but courts need evidence of relationship and harm. So we built evidence. Photographs of Mason at my house from infancy through age 7. Birthday cards he had made me. School pickup records. Medical emergency contact forms listing me. Texts from Ashley, asking me to babysit, asking me to help. Calling me his second safe place. Receipts for tuition deposits, soccer fees, winter coats. Therapy tools after he struggled with handwriting in kindergarten. Videos of David teaching him to plant tomato seedlings. And, separately, the financial documents. Helen did not want the case to become only about money. This is about Mason's best interest, she said. So is the money. Yes, but we present it carefully. We are not fighting Ashley because she kept you from Mason. We are showing a pattern where she cut off contact after you questioned misuse of his funds. That is exactly what happened. Then we prove it. The fraud review returned in August. The authorization form had been submitted electronically from an IP address associated with Evan and Ashley's home internet. David's signature had been uploaded as a scanned image. His medical records confirmed he was under observation at St. Luke's on December 12th and had received medication affecting cognition. Whitaker Trust flagged the signature as inconsistent after Helen requested manual review. The withdrawals had been initiated by Evan's login, but transferred into a joint account used primarily by Ashley. Ashley purchased a sectional sofa for $7,800, a lease down payment on a white Lexus, a family trip to Scottsdale, designer children's clothing, though Mason wore uniforms to school, a payment to a cosmetic dermatology clinic. The $31,000 cashier's check went toward a partial payment on Ashley's sister's failed event planning business. When Helen showed me that, I stared at the page. Her sister? Yes. Mason's college fund paid Ashley's sister's business debt? It appears so. I pressed my palms flat on the table. For a moment, anger moved through me so cleanly it almost felt like strength. Then it passed, and left grief behind. Not for the money alone. For Mason, whose future had been treated as a convenience. For David, whose careful bricks had been pulled loose. For Evan, who had become the kind of man who let his wife spend his son's education account, and then asked his mother not to make it worse. Court was scheduled for March 14th, nearly a year after the ban. During that year, Ashley shaped her story. She told neighbors I had become unstable after David's death. She told Evan's relatives I used money to control access to Mason. She told school parents I was struggling with boundaries. She posted quotes online about protecting peace from toxic family systems. Protecting peace. There is no shortage of beautiful language for ugly behavior. I did not respond publicly. I kept a notebook. Dates, texts, returned mail, missed school events, statements, receipts. Every time I wanted to write something online, I opened the notebook instead. Quiet is not empty when it is gathering proof. On the morning of court, I woke at 5:30. The house was still dark. I made tea in David's favorite mug by accident, then stood at the counter looking at it until the kettle clicked off. I decided to use it. At 7, I dressed in a navy suit, low heels, and the small silver cardinal pin David had bought me on our last anniversary. He had said it looked like a serious little bird with somewhere to be. I smiled when I pinned it on. Helen picked me up at 8:15. "You don't have to be brave every second," she said as we drove downtown. "I know." "Good. I only need to be accurate." She glanced at me. David would like that answer. Courtroom 3 was smaller than I expected. Beige walls, wooden benches, a flag in the corner, fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Judge Mary Ann Kessler was in her late 50s, with short, dark hair, steady eyes, and the expression of a woman who had heard too many adults explain why children should carry the weight of adult pride. Ashley and Evan arrived at 9:28. Ashley wore the cream blazer. Evan wore a gray suit that did not fit properly across the shoulders. He looked at me once, then away. I wanted to go to him. That shocked me. Even after everything, some mother part of me saw the boy who had once climbed into my bed during thunderstorms and whispered, "Can I sleep here? Just until the loud part is over?" But courtrooms are not for mothering grown men through consequences. I stayed seated. The hearing began at 10 o'clock. Ashley's attorney, Mr. Paul Denton, spoke first. He painted me as a grieving widow who had overstepped boundaries, used financial gifts as leverage, undermined parental authority, and reacted vindictively when Ashley and Evan limited access. "Mrs. Bennett loves her grandson," he said, as if love itself were the problem, but love does not entitle a grandparent to control a young family. Ashley testified next. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue before the first question. She described me as generous but intrusive, helpful but judgmental, loving but conditional. She said I criticized their spending, questioned their parenting, and made Mason anxious by implying his parents were irresponsible. Then Mr. Denton asked why they cut off contact. Ashley looked down, took a breath, and said, "Because Patricia refused to respect that we are Mason's parents. When we stopped accepting money, she became angry." Stopped accepting money. I wrote the phrase on the legal pad in front of me. Helen touched my wrist lightly. "Not yet." Ashley continued. She kept asking about accounts and bills that were not her business. She made us feel watched. Mason deserves peace. Judge Kessler looked at her notes. At 10:42, she asked the question. "Mrs. Bennett, before we discuss visitation, I need you to explain why the child's education savings account was emptied in December." Ashley's face changed. Mr. Denton stood. "Your Honor, that issue is separate from visitation." Judge Kessler looked at him. "Counsel, the petitioner alleges financial manipulation by the grandmother. The respondent has submitted evidence that contact was cut off shortly after questions were raised about the child's funds. I consider it relevant." He sat. Ashley swallowed. "Your Honor, the funds were used for family emergencies." "What emergencies?" "Household needs." "Please be specific." Ashley looked at Evan. Judge Kessler said, "Mrs. Bennett, I asked you." Ashley's fingers tightened around the tissue. "Mortgage pressure, car issues, medical bills." Helen opened our folder. Judge Kessler looked down at the account summary. "Do you consider a luxury vehicle lease deposit a medical bill?" Ashley's face flushed. "No, but reliable transportation is important for Mason." "Was the Lexus for Mason?" A sound moved through the courtroom. Small. Quickly swallowed, Ashley said, "It was the family car." Judge Kessler turned a page. "Was the Scottsdale Resort charge a household emergency?" Ashley's attorney stood again. "Your Honor." Sit down, Mr. Denton. He sat. The judge continued. Was the payment to a cosmetic dermatology clinic for the child? Ashley whispered, no. Was the cashier's check to your sister's business for the child? No answer. Ashley, Evan whispered. Judge Kessler looked at him. Mr. Bennett, you will have your turn. Ashley began crying then. Not the polished tears from earlier. These were frightened, angry tears. We were drowning, she said. Judge Kessler's voice remained calm. So you drained an account created for your son's education? Ashley said, Patricia had money. She could have helped us. There it was. The room heard it. Helen looked at me for half a second. Ashley continued, voice breaking. She knew we were struggling, and she just sat there judging us with all of David's money and that big empty house. We needed help. Judge Kessler said, so you took the child's funds because his grandmother would not give you hers. Ashley's mouth opened, closed. Evan put both hands over his face. I did not move. Short sentences sometimes become mirrors. Judge Kessler turned to Evan. Mr. Bennett, did you authorize these withdrawals? He stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. Did you submit the form adding yourself as authorized representative? Yes. Did your father sign that form? Evan looked at me. For the first time all day our eyes met. He looked ruined. No, he said. The courtroom went silent. Judge Kessler leaned back. Say that clearly. Evan's voice shook. No, my father did not sign it. Ashley hissed. Evan? He did not look at her. I scanned his signature from an old insurance document, he said. Ashley said we needed temporary access and that we would replace it before anyone noticed. Ashley stood. That is not fair. Judge Kessler said sharply, sit down. Ashley sat. Evan kept talking, as if stopping would kill him. I told myself Dad would have helped if he knew. Then he died, and everything got worse, and we kept using it. I knew it was wrong. My hands remained folded. Inside, something old and maternal cracked. Not for the man avoiding consequence, for the child he had been before weakness became character. Judge Kessler asked, why did you cut off Mrs. Patricia Bennett's contact with Mason? Evan looked down. Because she started asking questions. Ashley whispered, no. Evan's voice grew quieter. Because we were afraid she would find out. There it was. The truth. Not dramatic. Not shouted. Just placed on the record, where it could not be returned unopened. Judge Kessler called a recess at 11:12. I stood because Helen stood. My knees felt older than the rest of me. In the hallway, Ashley walked past me quickly, crying into her phone. Evan stayed near the courtroom door. He looked at me. Mom. I held up one hand, not cruelly, precisely. Not here. His face folded. Please. No, Evan, not here. Not before the court finishes. Not before Mason is protected. He nodded slowly. For once, he did not ask me to comfort him. That was the smallest beginning of accountability I had ever seen. When court resumed, Helen presented our evidence. She did not speak with drama. She did not need to. Photographs of my relationship with Mason. School records. Texts from Ashley calling me essential. Returned gifts. The ban message. The account statements. The forged authorization. The withdrawals. The trust review. At noon 18, Judge Kessler issued temporary orders. Mason would resume contact with me through scheduled visitation every other Saturday for 6 hours, gradually expanding if recommended by a court-appointed child counselor. Ashley and Evan were prohibited from discussing the case with Mason or disparaging me. The remaining education funds would stay frozen. A guardian ad litem would be appointed. The financial matter would be referred for further review, including possible restitution and fraud consequences. Ashley looked stunned. Evan looked relieved and terrified. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not victory. Access. A bridge back to Mason. That was all I had wanted at first. The judge looked directly at Ashley and Evan. This court is not punishing parents for financial hardship, she said. But a child's education fund is not an emergency lifestyle account. And a grandparent's refusal to provide unlimited money does not justify cutting off a meaningful relationship with a child. Ashley stared at the table. Judge Kessler continued. Mrs. Patricia Bennett appears to have provided stability, care, and documented support over many years. The court will determine long-term arrangements based on Mason's best interest, not adult resentment. Adult resentment. Ashley flinched. I watched her and felt no satisfaction, only exhaustion. The first visit happened 9 days later, March 23rd, 10 in the morning. A supervised family center at first because the court wanted transition documented. The room had beige carpet, a shelf of board games, 2 plastic dinosaurs, and a mural of balloons on one wall. I arrived 15 minutes early with a small bag of books and a container of homemade oatmeal cookies because Mason loved them and because I needed my hands to do something loving. At 10:03, the door opened. Mason walked in holding the sleeve of the counselor, a woman named Ms. Renee. He looked taller. Children grow even when you are not allowed to witness it. For 1 second, he stood still. Then he ran. "Grandma, Patty!" I knelt before I could think. He hit my arms like weather. I held him carefully, not too tight, because I did not want anyone to say I overwhelmed him. But Mason wrapped both arms around my neck and whispered, "I thought you were mad at me." That sentence entered my body like a blade. I pulled back enough to look at him. "Never," I said, "not 1 minute. Mom said grown-ups needed space." Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes with words. Did I do something? No. My voice stayed calm because children do not need our storms. "You did nothing wrong. I missed you every day." His lip trembled. "I missed cardinals." I smiled then, a real smile, painful and warm. "Then we should count some soon." We played dinosaur memory. He told me about school, a class hamster named Pickle, and a boy named Jonah who cheated at kickball. He ate 2 cookies and saved 1, for later in case feelings happen. I told him Grandpa David would have considered that excellent planning. Ms. Renee wrote notes in the corner. I did not care. Let the record show love. The months that followed were complicated. Ashley hated the visitation order. She complied because the court was watching. Evan began attending financial counseling and therapy, probably on advice of counsel, but eventually, I think, because shame had nowhere else to go. The fraud review became a separate matter. Helen advised me not to discuss details with anyone outside court and counsel. Restitution was ordered as part of the family court proceedings, with further legal review pending. Evan had to liquidate his fishing boat, close 2 credit cards, and set up a structured repayment plan into Mason's education account. Ashley's sister signed a promissory note for the amount her business received, though whether that money would ever return fully, I did not know. Ashley blamed me publicly for months. Her posts became vaguer but sharper. Some people care more about money than family. Boundaries reveal who truly loves your child. Not every grandmother is safe. I did not respond. Not because it did not hurt. Because Mason was watching, even when no one thought he was. One Saturday in June, during our visit at my house, after supervision had been lifted, Mason asked why his mom didn't like me anymore. We were on the back porch shelling peas. He had insisted on helping because he liked the sound of peas dropping into the metal bowl. I took my time. Your mom and I disagree about some grown-up things. Because of money? I looked at him. What makes you ask that? He shrugged. They whisper about money. Dad cries in the garage sometimes. My heart ached. Money is part of it, I said, but none of it is for you to fix. He pressed 1 pea flat between his fingers. Do I still get to go to college? I set the bowl down. Mason Bennett, you get to grow up first. Then when college comes, we will figure it out. Grandpa David wanted me to go. Grandpa David wanted you to have choices. College is one choice. He nodded. Can I choose dinosaurs? You can choose dinosaurs. He smiled. Small mercy, huge victory. By August, the court-appointed counselor recommended continued regular visitation, including occasional overnights. Judge Kessler adopted the schedule in September. Ashley objected, but less forcefully. Evan did not object. After the hearing, Evan approached me outside the courthouse. He looked thinner. Older. More like David around the eyes, which made me both angry and sad. Mom, he said, I know you don't owe me a conversation. That's true. I'm gonna say this anyway. I waited. I stole from my son. I lied about Dad's signature. I let Ashley blame you because I was afraid of what I'd done. I am sorry. Not because court made me say it, because Mason asked me why Grandpa David's college money was gone, and I had to look at him. His voice broke. I had to look at him, Mom. I said nothing for a moment. Traffic moved beyond the courthouse steps. A woman in a red coat passed us holding a stack of files. Ordinary life moving around, a son finally telling the truth too late. Are you replacing it? I asked. Yes. All of it? I'm trying. Try is not enough. I know. That was new. I studied his face. I love you, Evan. I do, but I do not trust you right now. He nodded, crying quietly. I know. And I will not protect you from the consequences of what you did. I know. You need to become the kind of father who can tell Mason the truth one day without making him carry your shame. He wiped his face. I'm working on it. Good. He looked at me like he wanted a hug. I did not give him one. Not then. Sometimes love steps back so accountability has room to stand. Ashley's apology came much later, and it was not graceful. It happened in November, after a second court review showed that continued obstruction could affect her standing. She arrived at my house at 4:30 on a cold afternoon, wearing leggings, a puffer jacket, and no makeup. I opened the door but did not invite her in. Patricia, she said, I need to say something. I held the door. All right. I'm sorry things got so out of hand. I looked at her. No. Her eyebrows drew together. What? That is not an apology. That is weather. She flushed. I'm trying. Then use nouns. Her mouth tightened. For a moment, the old Ashley returned, offended that I was not smoothing the path for her performance. Then she looked down. I'm sorry I used Mason to punish you. I waited. I'm sorry we took money from his college account. I'm sorry I helped Evan submit the form. I'm sorry I spent some of it on things that were not emergencies. I'm sorry I told people you were unsafe, when what I meant was that you had found out. The words were ugly. That is how I knew they were closer to true. Thank you, I said. She looked up, hope flickering. Can we start over? No. Her face fell. But I apologized. I heard you. Then what do you want? I want you to keep Mason out of adult punishment. I want every dollar repaid. I want you to stop rewriting what happened. I want time. She crossed her arms. Time for what? For your behavior to become more reliable than your regret. She looked away. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me. Maybe not. That's harsh. No, I said. It's honest. She left without another word. I watched her drive away and felt the strange sadness that comes when someone finally says part of the truth, but still wants the old benefits of the lie. The education fund did not magically recover. Money rarely returns as quickly as it disappears, but by Mason's 9th birthday, the balance had grown back to $29,000 through court-ordered repayment, my renewed contributions, and a generous deposit from David's older brother, who sent a check with a note that said, David would haunt me if I didn't. I laughed when I read that. Then I cried. On Mason's birthday, I gave him a telescope. Not expensive, not enormous, just good enough for the moon. That night he stayed over at my house. We set it up in the backyard at 9:15, with cicadas humming and the grass damp under our shoes. He looked through the eyepiece and gasped. Grandma, it has craters. It does. Do you think Grandpa David can see the same moon? I hope so. He stepped back and looked at me. Mom says you and Dad had a big fight about my money. I breathed carefully. Your dad and Mom made choices about money that belong to your future. The court is helping fix it. Did they steal it? The words sat between us. Children deserve truth that fits their hands, not lies that rot under the floorboards. They used money they should not have used, I said. He looked down. Does that mean they don't love me? No, sweetheart. It means people can love you and still make wrong choices. Very wrong choices. Their job now is to repair what they can and become safer with their choices. He nodded slowly. Did you fight because you love me? I touched his hair. Yes. He leaned against me. Okay. Then he looked back through the telescope. Just like that. Children can hold truth when adults stop making it heavier with denial. 3 years have passed since that first court hearing. Mason is 11 now. taller than my shoulder if he stands on the porch step and claims it counts. He still likes dinosaurs, though now he corrects museum plaques under his breath. He still counts cardinals. He still eats scrambled eggs with too much cheese. The college fund is not where David intended it to be, but it is alive, protected now by a court-approved trustee. No parent withdrawals, no emergency lifestyle access, no scanned signatures. Every contribution documented. Every statement sent to Helen and to me. Evan has become steadier. Not perfect, steadier. He works for a different company now, smaller salary but more structure. He attends every financial review with the trustee and sends me proof of each repayment without being asked. He and Ashley separated for 8 months, then reconciled under conditions I do not pretend to understand. Their marriage is their business until it harms Mason. That boundary took me years to learn. Ashley and I are civil, not warm, civil. At soccer games, she sits on one end of the bleachers and I sit on the other. Sometimes she nods, sometimes she does not. She no longer posts about toxic grandmothers. I consider that progress. Last Christmas, Mason made me an ornament shaped like a cardinal. On the back, in careful handwriting, he wrote, "Grandma Patty's house is safe." I stood in the kitchen holding that ornament for a long time. Safe, not rich, not right, not victorious. Safe. That was the word worth fighting for. People sometimes ask whether I regret taking my son and daughter-in-law to court. They phrase it gently, as if court is the harshest thing that happened. It was not. The harsh thing was a child's future being drained by adults who called it emergency. The harsh thing was a grandmother being erased for noticing. The harsh thing was a little boy thinking his absence from my life might have been his fault. Court was not the wound. Court was where the wound stopped being hidden. I do not hate Ashley. That surprises people. Hate would keep her too close. I prefer accuracy. She was selfish. She was afraid. She was entitled. She used therapeutic language as a fence around bad behavior. She harmed my grandson. She harmed me. She harmed David's memory. All of that is true. It is also true that shame can either harden a person or begin changing them. I do not control which one happens in her. I only control whether Mason is protected while she decides. As for Evan, loving an adult child through consequences is one of the hardest things a mother can do. When they are small, you can pick them up. When they are grown, sometimes the most loving thing is to stop catching what they keep throwing. I miss the version of him I thought he would become. But I have learned not to let grief for an imagined son blind me to the real grandson standing in front of me. David was right. Nobody builds a future all at once. You lay bricks. Sometimes, when people you love pull those bricks loose, you have to gather what remains, go to court, and start laying them again. If you are listening to this, and someone has used access to a child as a weapon, or called your boundaries control, or punished you for refusing to fund their chaos, I want you to hear me. Love does not require unlimited money. Family does not mean handing over your savings to people who will not show you a bill. Being a grandmother does not mean smiling quietly while adults damage a child and call it parenting. You can be calm and still go to court. You can be loving and still keep records. You can forgive some things and still require repayment. And sometimes, the person accusing you of manipulation is only angry because the judge finally asked about the missing money. Thank you for spending this time with me and with Patricia Bennett's story here on Ultimate Revenge. Stories like this are for every woman who has been pushed out, blamed, or silenced after saying no to people who confused her generosity with obligation. If this story found you at the right moment, I hope you remember that protecting a child's future is not control. Sometimes it is the purest form of love. Follow Ultimate Revenge for more stories about women who were underestimated, betrayed, and quietly took their power back. So tell me, if your daughter-in-law banned you from seeing your grandson after draining his college fund, would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you bring every statement to court?